Welcome again to Bloomerang Academy. Thank you so much for joining me today, where we are talking about how you can use Bloomerang to create your thank you letters, as well as take advantage of our Ncoa processing. Our agenda for today, we're going to be taking a look at thank you letters. The concepts we'll be talking about today, you can apply to any type of letter that you're running in Bloomerang, but we are going to take a look at thank you letters because this is something that everyone sends. So in terms of the thank you letters, we'll take a look at how you can design and edit your thank you letters, what merge fields you can use in your thank you letters, as well as a data table. So the merge fields are the individual fields that you can use. What is the date of the gift, the amount of the gift, where data table is really helpful in terms of itemizing if there's more than one gift that meets the filters. And then we'll take a look at the interactions as well. On the Ncoa processing side, we'll take a look at how you can turn it on, what kind of address updates are made in your database, as well as the deceased suppression that also comes with the Ncoa processing. First thing that we want to take a look at is let's take a look at adding a gift because that's where everything starts, right? So let's say we are looking for John Watson and we'll add a gift to his account. Click on the blue drop-down arrow here and new donation. If the constituent or the donor has any recurring donations or pledges that are currently ongoing, you'll be able to add a payment to that pledge or recurring donation. If you just need to add a one-off gift, one-off donation, just go ahead and select that and click Create Donation. All the required fields are in green, and I want you also to pay close attention to the fields that are available because these are the fields that are available for you to use as a merge field in your letter. So for example, date, you can use that in your merge field later of thank you for your gift on, this is the date that it's going to pull from. Thank you for your gift of amount, this is the field that it's going to pull from. Thank you for your gift of amount that you gave on date to the, let's say, unrestricted fund, if you wanted to put that in. These fields are what are available for you to put into your letter. So let's say John Watson gave us a $500 gift to the unrestricted fund because let's say we have our annual campaign going on and he gave because his friend Sherlock Holmes personally solicited him. Let's select the method of cash for now. And you can put in any notes about the gift as well if needed. Also, if you're tracking certain custom fields about the gift, go ahead and fill those out. Another thing I wanted to point out is because Sherlock Holmes personally solicited him, let's go ahead and add a soft credit to Sherlock Holmes. Now, I know a lot of you are going to ask, what is a soft credit? A soft credit is a way to give a constituent credit for a gift that came in because of them, even though the gift did not necessarily come out of their own pocket. So in this case, John may not have given if Sherlock hadn't solicited him. So we want to give credit to Sherlock. Another thing I wanted to point out is the acknowledgements field here. So a couple of things to take a look at. First, the acknowledge field here is going to default to no. This means that the gift has not been acknowledged yet. There are options here where you can manually change this to yes or do not acknowledge. Maybe John handed me the cash. I had a conversation with him where I thanked him, and that counts as our thank you conversation in person. You might want to mark that as yes. Perhaps it's a recurring gift where the donor tells you, you don't need to send me a letter every time my recurring gift is processed or every time I send a check in for my monthly gift, bi-weekly gift, just send me a summary at the end of the year. You can use do not acknowledge for that. We also have this field here that says generate letter on save. This is particularly useful for those one-off letters. So you can think about this two ways. A lot of you may already have a process in place of when or what is the regular cadence where you run your thank you letters. Perhaps at the end of every week, you run thank you letters for all the gifts that came in that week. We'll take a look at that. Or perhaps there's one-off instances where you're already in there entering the gift. You want to go ahead and create a letter for that constituent. You can select or you can choose here, assign a letter. This will pull in any transaction letter with a purpose of acknowledgement that you can use let's just say weekly thank you here. And you can click this button to generate letter on save. And when I click save, it's going to take us straight to the letter editor so we can thank this one particular gift. I wanted to point out there's two ways. You can generate letters in batches, or you can generate the letter immediately after entering the gift. For now, I'm going to clear that selection and then click save, and we'll take a look at how do we acknowledge this particular gift as part of a batch. So once we've entered our gift, let's take a look at our letters. I also wanted to point out that you'll see here, this is our letter section and this is our email section. Those two sections don't talk to each other. If the intention is for you to send a thank you electronically to a donor's inbox, you're going to want to start out creating an email. If the intention is for something to be printed out to then be mailed to the donor, you're going to want to create a letter. You cannot create a letter with the intention of attaching it to an email that you send out of Bloomerang. Those two systems don't talk to each other. Do you want to create a thank you letter, or do you want to create a thank you email? We have a separate class on creating emails. Today, we're going to be focusing on creating letters. So let's do that. So click letters. If this is the first time you're creating letters in Bloomerang, your screen is going to look a little bit different. You're going to get a button that says create your first letter. If you're like me and maybe you've had or you've run a couple of letters now, your screen might look a little bit like mine. So it's going to show you your most recent mailings, which will always show you your 5 most recent mailings. When we run our letter today, it's going to bump off the oldest one from the list and put the mailing that we just ran at the very top. This list also shows all the letters that have been created in my database. It doesn't matter if I created those letters or a colleague of mine created that letter. All of that is going to be visible and available for everyone to edit in our letter editor. So I already have a number of letters here. And as you can see, I've created letters for specific purposes. That's something we recommend that you do. If you have a specific pledge acknowledgement, pledge payment acknowledgement, pledge reminder, your weekly or general thank you, your soft credit thank you, you can create as many different letters as you need in your database. If you're creating a letter for the first time, there's a great feature where you can copy the letters so that you can create the letter one time, put your logo in there, adjust your formatting, and you can just keep copying that letter so you don't have to rebuild all those elements when you create a different letter. We have a great question here from John. Would you recommend having various thank you letters for different donations and services provided? Or would a general thank you letter be a better handle on donor relations, and would it be more organized, or do donors like more personalized letters for specific donations that they may have given? Great question. There isn't just one answer to this. I would ask you, think about the merge fields that you want to include in the letter. When you send that thank you letter to the donor, what are the details you want to communicate back to them? Because you can insert those merge fields into the letter. If it's going to be different, you're probably going to want to create different letters. The reason, for example, I have many different types of letters here is I'm communicating different things. For a pledge thank you, maybe I want to say thank you for your pledge amount that you gave on pledge date. Your first installment is on first installment date. None of my other types of thank you letters are going to have that necessarily, but I want to personalize it for that. If it's an in-kind letter, I want to say thank you for your in-kind gift of the in-kind description. Your monetary donations won't have that in-kind description. So think about what do you want to communicate to the donors and kind of figure out from there what are the different types of letters that you need. Sheila asks, how do you copy a letter? Great question. I'm going to show you real quick. There's a button here. Anytime you see this blue drop-down arrow in Bloomerang, just click on it and see what it does. That usually means that you're going to have more options. So whenever you see that blue drop-down arrow, just click on it and see what it does. So edit will allow you to open a letter. Copy here, that allows you to make a copy of the letter. And if you see here, if I just create copy, it's just going to create the same letter, 2021 in this case, year-end receipts, and it's going to have copy, and you can go in there and edit the details like the name and personalize it to what type of letter you want that to be. A note though, when you're copying, make sure it's the same type of letter that you want. Great questions. Okay, so for today, we'll start out with creating a letter from scratch. So we'll click New. And this is what I alluded to earlier of make sure you're copying the right type of letter, because there's different types of letters that you can create in Bloomerang. And it hinges on how are you filtering your audience? Is it by constituent, transaction, or interaction? Constituent letters are great for profile-based solicitations, newsletters. Transactions, this is what you would use for your acknowledgements, receipts, pledge reminders. Interactions, event confirmations, volunteer acknowledgements. Also important to note here, when you create a constituent letter, you have access to constituent fields that you can add as merge fields into the letter. If you create a transaction letter, you'll have access to your transaction fields, your date, amount, fund, campaign appeal, your constituent fields, name, custom fields, email, address, those types of things. Interactions would be maybe you're tracking volunteer hours, maybe you're tracking registrations. So if you create a transaction letter, you have access to transaction fields. If you create an interaction letter, you have access to interaction fields. Constituent fields are available in all types of letters. So for your thank you letters, make sure you're creating or selecting transactions. And then these are the different fields. So describe your letter. Maybe this is my end of week letter. And the purpose is important to set as well. There's many different purposes here, but I want to point out the difference between acknowledgement and receipt. We use acknowledgements as the thank yous, and we use receipt for tax purposes. So if you are creating your year-end tax receipts, you would likely select a purpose of receipt. For acknowledgement, these are your regular thank yous that you send out. Also important to note, that acknowledgement field that we looked at earlier, if you run a transaction letter with a purpose of acknowledgement, it will automatically flip that acknowledgement flag from no to yes. So I'm going to open John Watson's account here in another tab so we can review what that field is. This purpose, if you select acknowledgement, this is the only type of letter that will automatically, when you run this letter, change the acknowledgement flag from no to yes. That automatically happens. So let's go back to the letter. For today, we want an acknowledgement letter. And then you have the option to create one letter per transaction, constituent, or household. If you generate one letter per transaction, if a donor gave more than once, let's say John Watson gave twice, he's going to get two separate letters for each of those gifts. If you generate a letter per constituent, he's only going to get one letter. And you, of course, will have to adjust the letter so you can use a data table to itemize his gifts, if that's what you like. Now, household is typically what I generally recommend, because even though the donation is on an individual's timeline, more than likely it's coming from the household. So what this does too is, let's say we entered a donation on my account. It doesn't just say, "Hi, Diana, thank you for your gift." It's going to include my husband, or however we set up our household and our household name to be. So you are acknowledging both people in the household, not just the individual whose timeline the gift is on. So I like doing that. A question we get here is, what if a person is not in a household? Will they still get the letter then? Or is this only going to households? This will pick up anyone who is in a household and anyone who is not. The difference is that if the person is not in a household, it's addressing that individual. If a person is in the household, it is addressing the household. Another big thing here is maybe there are some gifts that are on my timeline. Maybe there are some gifts that are on my husband's timeline. When you're running the letters, if both of us gave in the time frame that you're filtering for, or both of us have gifts in the time frame you're filtering for, we get acknowledged through that one letter for both of those gifts. Another question that has come up here is, especially for tax receipts, this assumes that they file jointly. Maybe they don't, maybe they want separate letters. You know your constituents best. So exercise that judgment as well when you are running your thank you letters. We have a great question here. Can you explain the best way to form a household so the name comes out appropriately? So we're going to take a little detour here and take a look at the Watson household. So if you take a look at the household, pay attention to the fields. As you're creating the household, make sure that the fields that you're using are correct. When you create a new household from scratch, it auto-populates the first name field that you fill out. You want to make sure to customize that. Do you want the household name to be the Watsons? Check your informal name, John and Mary, because if we are inserting that as a merge field into your letter, you want it to say, hi, John and Mary, instead of saying, hi, the Watsons. So make sure you have those name fields set up correctly. And while we're here as well, you never want to use household name as a merge field in your letter unless you are specifically mailing only to households. Because remember that create one letter per household doesn't mean this just goes to households. It just means that if they're in a household, it will pick up the household fields. But you have constituents who are not in households in that letter too, and they won't have a household name, so it's just going to be blank. So you want to use typically informal name or formal name in your letter based on how formal or informal your organization is with your communications to your donors. Great question. Okay, so one letter per household. There's fields here for allow blank merge fields and allow bad, incomplete, or missing addresses. For now, I'm going to leave these unchecked, and we'll take a look at what do we mean by blank merge fields and what do we mean by bad, incomplete, or missing addresses. This essentially means like you're trying to run a letter and there's no address in the database. Do you still want to generate a letter for that person even if you don't have their physical mailing address? That might seem silly because why are you going to generate a letter that you're not sending? But maybe you're hand delivering the letter. Maybe you deliver a handful of letters to the organization where a lot of people have given and it's stuffed into their mailbox. It is up to you if you want to generate those letters or not. For today, we will leave that unchecked. You can always go back and change this afterward. So we are going to click Next. I like to say that if you're familiar with most word processing tools like Microsoft Word, this will be a little bit familiar to you, or I hope this will be a little bit familiar to you. You don't see the toolbar yet, but when you click into the letter, then you'll be able to see that toolbar. And hopefully this toolbar will be familiar to you. There's two things I will point out that you may be seeing for the first time is your Insert Bloomerang Field and Insert Bloomerang Data Table. So Insert Bloomerang Field, these are your merge fields that I've been talking about. If you want to put in the date, amount, fund, name, that's going to be pulling from the database. These are your merge fields. And your data table is, again, if a constituent gave more than once, let's say I'm running my letters weekly, they may have given twice during that week, and I want to just give them one letter acknowledging both gifts. The data table is great for itemizing each of those gifts and being able to show details for each of those gifts, as opposed to just like, let's say, a total of the two gifts. We have, and the default letter will populate here. Let's just take a look. Any merge fields you'll see will be wrapped in these boxes. So it's automatically pulling in name, address, formal name, amount, date. You can change all of that if you'd like. We'll take a look at that, but for now, let's personalize our letter a little bit more. A lot of you ask, can I add my logo or my letterhead to the letter? You can absolutely do that as long as you have it in an image file in JPEG, PNG, or GIF. Since you're printing it out, GIF is probably less useful, but just a good note to know that that is possible. So if I want to add an image or a logo in there, I'll click the Insert Edit Image icon, and that's going to bring up, if I click on this search or source here, that's going to bring up my Bloomerang image manager. So this contains all of the images that have been uploaded to my image manager. It doesn't have to be by myself. It can be a colleague that uploaded this image. So let's say I want to use this blossom image in my letter. So I'm going to click OK, and it's a little bit bigger, and it's even giving you a warning that because of how big this is, the content is not going to fit into a single page. So I'm going to want to resize that. So I'll just drag and drop that so it's a little bit smaller. A couple of things you can also do here. That looks a little bit wonky with the image there and the text over here. You can change the alignment and the wrapping of these images. For example, do you want the image to be left aligned? Then that brings all the other fields in alignment. Do you want it to be in the center? Do you want it to be justified? Do you want it to be left aligned? So you can play with that and move that around. I like this placement here on the right, and it fills up that space nicely. So you can add any image that you want there. So it's automatically going to populate your organization's information, name, street, city, state, zip. If I like that, if you want to change formal name to informal name, let's go ahead and do that for practice. There's my cursor. I'm just going to place it there. And all I need to do to delete the merge field that's already in there is just backspace or delete. And then I'm going to go into my merge field here and select the merge field that I want. So we'll click Insert Bloomerang Merge Field. I'm going a little faster because I know what I'm looking for. I highly recommend, if you're not familiar with what fields you can use as a merge field or you can use as a filter, just open it up and take a look and just go ahead and browse. We also have a help article called Report Columns and Filters that might help a little bit with that. But I recommend just clicking on it, browsing through, and figure out what you are looking for. So constituent fields are available in all types of letters. This applies to emails as well. I'm going to scroll down. There's your address fields, phone number, and because we're in a transaction letter, there's our transaction fields. What we are looking for right now is I want that informal name. Oops. Search. And just like that, it's going to populate that. So let's say we want to thank you for your amount donation. Let's say $500 donation that you made on date. Of course, you want to personalize that for the impact. And then thank you. If you would like to insert a signature in here, if we have Blossom signature, again, as long as that's an image file in JPEG, PNG, or GIF, you can insert that, resize as usual. And great question here as well. Can you insert custom fields? Absolutely, you can. Let's look at one of my, this isn't going to make sense, but just to show you, what are the different custom fields that you have in your database? So for example, I have a custom field that is attributes. So what are the different attributes? And that will populate. Of course, structure your sentence so it flows into the sentence however you want, or a different approach could be, for example, thank you for your gift. You can say date, amount, and insert the merge fields that way. Just simply typing the date doesn't insert the merge field into there. I'm just saying this is where I want it to go. So I can go in here, do my date. Another thing to be careful, there's lots of different date fields in Bloomerang. Make sure you're selecting the one you want, and typically you want the one that just says date under transaction. Now I know this looks a little bit weird now because I already have date and amount in there, but I'm just showing you a different way to structure your letter. So you can build the merge fields into the sentences as part of them, or kind of enumerate them like this. I still want to kind of have this. So again, this date here will populate the actual date, whatever it is, amount, whatever it is, $500. But instead of them just floating, you want to have some indicator of what it is. Great question. Okay, and that would be your merge fields. Now, if you wanted to insert a data table, you can put the data table wherever you would like or wherever it makes sense in the letter. For example, let's say just want the merge fields, or sorry, the data table somewhere here. Make sure to place your cursor where you want the merge field or the data table to be, and then click on that data table icon. So when you click on it, the data table can have up to 5 columns. So here, for example, it's date, amount, fund. You can add additional columns. Probably don't want to do this, but just as a sample, let's say your campaign. Let's say your appeal. Let's say you have a custom field that you want to use if you're tracking a specific thing. You can add up to 5 columns. And again, it will itemize each of the gifts. If there's more than one gift, each gift will be its own line, and these will be the columns in the data table. You can adjust the alignment of each of the columns or the overall alignment of the data table. For now, we're just going to click OK, and that's where it's going to be. I know the letter looks a little bit rough right now, but it hasn't populated the information yet, but it just shows you that's the information that will be populated, and that's where it will be populated. So we'll leave that for now. What are some other things you can change? Again, this is your formatting tool. Make use of that however you would like. You can download a preview of the letter as well. This is great. I love this for some of you who already have pre-printed letterheads or stationery with pre-printed letterheads. The download preview is great to use for, let's say, I'm still kind of adjusting what my margins are and I want to see, I like to hold it up against the light of like, do I need to adjust my margins in Bloomerang? The download preview is great for that. When you download the preview, all of the merge fields are just kind of going to be X'd out because we don't know what the fields are yet, but it's great for that. You can also adjust your page settings. So if you click on page settings, you can choose your letter size. You can choose your margins as well. These are the letter sizes that you have to choose from. So half letter, executive letter, legal, etc. So you can choose the size and adjust the top, bottom, left, and right margins as well. So that's one of those things. Again, if we have stationery with pre-printed letterhead on the top, maybe I adjust the top margins. If I click update, that moves that down. Maybe we have stationery with pre-printed letterhead on the sidebar, I should say, rather than letterhead. Maybe I'll adjust the left-hand margin for that. That's where you would adjust. Actually, I'm going to go back and I'm just going to keep everything at 1 for now. And that's where you would go to adjust that. A great thing that we have as well that's built in is the readability test. You may have noticed I have the red lines here, that's my Grammarly popping up, but we have the readability test built in as well. So this just helps you to audit your communications. So if you take a look at that, it's going to look at 2 things. One is the U test. Ideally, for donor-centric communications, you want to use you words 2 times as much as we words. You want to make it about the donor. Thank you for your gift. You helped 5 puppies, or you helped 5 families, or whatever the impact of the gift is. Now, there are times when breaking the rules is important. Let's say you're writing a newsletter that is about your organization. That may not apply. But for something like a thank you letter, I love this tool. There is also the Flesch-Kincaid reading level test, which takes a look at the reading level. Basically, that's how easy is it to scan your letter. And ideally, it should be between the 6th and the 8th grade. This isn't because you assume that the reading level of your donors is between the 6th and 8th grade level. This just means it's easy for them to scan. This doesn't necessarily have to be a thesis or anything. This is a thank you letter. The ideal range is between the 6th and 8th grade. We have a great question here on data tables. How do you create a data table that will intuitively know if the donation is a check or credit card without having to reformat the letter? This is a great question. Let's click back here and take a look at John Watson's gift. These are the different fields that you can insert, right? So here is method. If you insert method as a column in your data table, it's going to pick up whatever you selected here. So if that's check, the method is going to say check. If that's cash, the method is going to say cash. It will automatically pick that up based on your selections, based on your input as you were entering the gift. Think about that too. So maybe you want to go back and, all right, what fields here, what fields about the gift am I putting into the letter? is that going to say what I want it to say, or what is appropriate to say, what is accurate to say? Great question. Wonderful. And that's kind of our quick overview of our letter editor. Of course, you would go to your filters. You can filter for however you want. It is automatically filtering out any constituent that is deceased, or if, because this is a letter, if they've set in their communication restrictions, do not mail, will automatically filter those constituents out. There is also a filter that excludes soft credits, but maybe you're creating your soft credit letter. You can just drag and drop it into the include section instead. These are the defaults that are there to help guide you. You can always change it and personalize it to what you need. We're going to drag that back here because this is our letter for our soft credits. We're going to take a look at our filters. And again, your filters will depend on what date range are you looking at? What's your process for sending out your thank you letters? So maybe my process, for example, let's pretend for my pretend organization, our process is we send out thank you letters every Friday, and we want to send those out for any gift that came in during the week. So I'll probably want to filter by date. Weeks go by Sunday to Saturday. So last week will be the previous Sunday to Saturday. If I'm running it on a Friday, I'll probably want this week. So this week's Sunday to Saturday. Let's do that. And let's take a look at any gift that came in during that period. So it's picking up a couple of gifts. There is also one very powerful filter to take a look at. So you can see here, going back to our gift, there's an acknowledged field. But wait, we said that this week is Sunday to Saturday, and it's only Friday, for example. What about those gifts that came in last Saturday? If I ran the gift on a Friday, I wouldn't have caught them yet. A filter or a field we like to filter for is the acknowledgement field. You can filter by that. So I'm going to click or here and select acknowledgement status is no. And because that's an or, I'm just telling the system, if you find a gift in my database that hasn't been acknowledged yet, go ahead and add them to the letter, regardless of what the date is. So you see, I have a couple of more results. I know you all are better at sending your thank you letters to your donors, but I'm not as good as sending thank you letters to my pretend donors here. But that's a great catch-all filter. Please add them in here. We may have missed them for whatever reason, but if they haven't been acknowledged yet, let's go ahead and catch them, please. So that's a great catch-all there. So if it hasn't been acknowledged yet, go ahead and include it. If you go to your details tab, these are the same details that we took a look at earlier. Again, you can always change that if you need to. If you need to change your allow blank merge fields, allow bad, incomplete, or missing addresses, your name, purpose, create one letter per, you can always change that after the fact as well. So our letter is looking good. Let's save and preview and see what that does. So you can see here transactions found. I have quite a few transactions that haven't been acknowledged yet. And you can see here, it's also showing you households found and households skipped, and how many actual letters are we going to generate. We'll come back to that. So if you look at recipients, this shows you who are the folks that are going to get the letter. And then you can take a look at skipped recipients, and you can see here, what are the issues? Why are they being skipped? It looks like for this batch of letters for me, I have a couple who have a bad address. I have a couple who have incomplete addresses. It gives you more information. We don't have a city for Lara Croft, so we can't generate a letter. We have a blank street for Alfred Pennyworth, so we can't generate a letter for him. And this goes back to, I'm going to go back and make changes. Go to our details, because I said I don't want anyone in there if they have bad, incomplete, or missing addresses. If I wanted them in there and generate a letter for them anyway, I would click that checkbox. Because I don't want them, we will automatically skip anyone who has a bad, incomplete, or missing address. So we'll go ahead and click Save and preview again. So that's what that means, right? We are skipping those because we said we don't want to allow bad, incomplete, or missing addresses. So we're going to skip them. And you can always take a look at who was skipped and why. Another reason you may see a skip is because they have multiple values for date. So multiple values for date. What does that mean? Again, we'll go back and make changes. We have an amount field here, and currency and number fields will total if there's more than one. But if someone had 2 gifts, which date do we pick here? We don't know, and the system won't make that decision for you. The data table is great because it can itemize those gifts, but if we know that there's a number of constituents or there's a number of donors that have more than one gift, maybe I just take out that field. The solution might be as simple as that. We know for sure that they're going to have multiple gifts. Let's take that out. Very relevant for recurring gifts. So if you're sending a thank you, for example, to recurring donors and recurring gift payments, and you want to itemize the individual payments, the amount will total, but you don't want to put a date here because there's more than one date. That's the merge field issue that's happening there. For today's letter, we're going to keep that unchecked. So we're only going to send a letter to the 22 constituents. We're about to run the letter. Let's see what happens when we run the letter. So when we click run, you're going to have 2 options. 1, you can do a test. 2, you can actually create your letters. When you do a test, it's going to just give you the first 5 letters. This is just as a check for you. Does everything look right? Are the merge fields that you're using really what you want in that letter? Do you want to make adjustments? So this is just a test. So it's not going to create any interactions on the constituents timeline. It's not going to add to the most recent mailings. You just want to verify that everything is correct. Now, when we create our actual letters, it's going to run all of the letters. Here, in this case, we have 22. It's going to run all 22. The other thing that will happen is it will create an interaction for each letter. So if John Watson was part of that batch, when the letter is run, he's going to have an interaction on his timeline for the letter. It's going to add to the recent mailings, which we'll take a look at again. And it's because this is a transaction letter with a purpose of acknowledgement, this won't happen with every type of letter, but because this is a transaction letter with a purpose of acknowledgement, it's going to flip this from no to yes. So these are the actual letters that you intend to print and send out to your donors. Let's do that. So we're going to click run. It's going to think for a bit as it's running. As it's running, we have a question here. When you make filter changes, your data automatically refreshes. Is that a setting? Mine doesn't do that. I have to hit refresh. Great question. That depends on the size of your database. If you have a large database, it takes a huge toll on the system to refresh every time you make a change. That's why you have to manually click that refresh button. Because my database is smaller, since it's a test database, it automatically refreshes for me. Great question. Now that we have generated our letters, we have the option to download the letters and also download the addresses. The letters are the actual PDFs of the letter that I intend to print out. And yes, they are exported in PDF format, not Word format. The letter editor doesn't translate well to Word. Things tend to shift and you're not quite seeing on screen what will actually in Word or printed out. So everything is in PDF. The addresses are good for, let's say you're preparing mailing labels for your envelopes. The addresses are a great way to take a look at that. We're going to download the letter and let's take a look at that. This is what my letter looks like. This is to Big Kahuna Burger. There's the $50 on that date. This is what the data table looks like. Again, be wary. For this particular gift, I didn't have a campaign or appeal selected. So if there wasn't anything, that would just be blank. Again, these are not necessarily the fields that you want in your letter, but just to show you what that will look like. There's your informal name, there's your fields, and so on. These are all the letters in my batch. So when we go back to Bloomerang, let's go back to letter home. So this is our letter that we just ran. It's going to be in the most recent mailings. Let's go back to John Watson. Let's refresh this. Maybe he had more than one. He had more than one gift. So it didn't flip the acknowledgement flag for him, but if he was in that batch, that would flip the acknowledgement flag for him and add the interaction to his timeline. Let's go back here. Now, if I wanted to edit individual letters, let's take a look at Big Kahuna Burger. If we wanted to take a look at the letter for Big Kahuna Burger, there's the letter that we have. We're going to click into that. If I wanted to personalize just this letter, I can always click into the letter, click edit, and make changes to the letter here. And that's how you can personalize your individual letters. However, let's say I'm looking over my letters and I'm like, oh no, I misspelled our organization's name, or we've moved and this is not our address anymore. We need to make a change to all of the letters. Luckily, we were able to catch it before we printed it. We can go here and again, if there's a drop-down arrow, click on it, see what it does. You can always download the letters again if you need. Maybe I had already printed it and I was a little bit clumsy and spilled my tea on it. I can just download the letters again and reprint. If I wanted to download the addresses, I can. But let's say I wanted to make a list to the entire batch of letters. I can delete this mailing. I want to make sure I still have, let's go back to Big Kahuna here. That's the letter that we just ran. This was the gift that was acknowledged. It marked that as yes. If I wanted to redo the entire letter, I can go here and click delete. That's kind of like your undo button. So if I click delete, it's going to ask me, first it's going to tell me deleting the mailing will delete the letter PDF and remove the interactions for the mailing. It's going to delete the PDF, and it's going to remove the interaction entirely. And then you have the option, do you want to reset the acknowledgement field back to no or keep it at yes? Going back to the gift, do you want to reset this to yes or to no, or do you want to keep it as yes? So for today, let's say I want to reset it. Are you sure? Yes. So when I do that, it doesn't make any changes to the letter template itself. It just takes out that mailing. So it's like it never happened. So if I go back in here, if I refresh, so this is a yes, and that's the letter. If I refresh, it's back to no. If I go back up to the timeline, the letter is gone. So that's like your undo button. If you're like, oh no, I need to make changes to the entire letter. Let me undo that batch. I can delete the mailing and then go back into my letter, make the changes that I want. And then, well, let's say I made changes. Let's pretend I made changes and then save and preview and run the letter again. And that's how you could undo and then redo your mailing. Now, I did say we were going to go back to John Watson. So let's say we have this gift, right? So we haven't acknowledged his gift yet. So let's say we want to send him that end of week letter that we just created, and we want to generate that letter on save. We took a look at what it was like to run letters in a batch. Now let's say we just entered a gift. We want to generate a letter just for this gift. You can select the letter that you want, click generate letter on save, click save. It takes you directly to the letter. And I can go in here and personalize as I see fit. So let's say we're going to edit letter because there's a hanging comma there that we don't need. Instead, let's accept that suggestion. Whatever else I wanted to add or I wanted to make edits to, I can, and just click save. So that's already in his timeline, and I would just download that specific letter and send off that just one letter to John Watson. So those are the two different ways that you could do it. Do you want to be running your letters in a batch? You can run your letters in a batch. Are there individual letters that, oh, hey, I'm already entering this gift. I'm going to go ahead and run this letter for this donor right now. You can do that as well. Make sure you've created your letter beforehand so that when you are entering your gift, that letter is available to be selected. Because whatever, you have to create these letters in your database first so that you can select them as an option for the letter to be sent. So make sure that's already there. All right, I'm going to take a look at quick questions that we have before we move to our NCOA processing. Is there any way to use or add a font that is not listed as an option in the editor? There is not currently a way to do that. If you would like to make that suggestion, I'll forward your comment as a suggestion to our product team. But currently, the fonts that we have there are web-safe fonts that all devices should have. That's the reason why those are the fonts that are available, is because they're available on all devices. That's a great suggestion. Is there an editing program that does work well with your downloaded file? This isn't just an issue with our letter editor. It's the way that Word reads them. If you do have Microsoft Word 13 and up, they do have built-in functionality. Most modern versions of Word have the functionality to convert a PDF to a Word file. Although that will still happen no matter where your PDF came from, it's not a guarantee that it will transfer correctly over to Word. Great question here. When I am doing letters and encounter a hiccup, is there a chat on Bloomerang that can help right then? Absolutely. Thank you for asking that. Just click on this question mark icon on the top right here. You can go to our help and videos from here. You can send an email to our support team. You can initiate a live chat. Live chat is exactly what it is. It's a live chat. And you're going to get a real person right away that can help you and walk you through the steps as you're creating your letter. Thank you for that question. And email and live chat are free. So please, our support team loves helping you all. So please don't be shy. Please reach out if you have questions. Okay. So our NCOA features. I'm a huge advocate of this because you don't want to be wasting postage on donors that you can't reach because you have the wrong address for them. You don't want to risk damaging the relationship by sending solicitation letters if the donor is already deceased. Or if you want to contact the family, at least you'll be able to do it with more information. So if you have a standard Bloomerang license, NCOA processing comes free with your database. If you're an administrator in your database, you can go to Settings, My Organization, and scroll down and turn on your NCOA processing. Mine is already turned on, so it says View NCOA Dashboard. For you, if it's not turned on yet, it's going to say Activate NCOA Processing. You can click on that button. Again, if you see that button and you have a standard database that's free that already comes with it, you just need to turn it on. So what are the things that it can do for you? So first is the NCOA, National Change of Address. So let's take a look at this constituent here. Let's take a look at their profile. They have 2 addresses on their profile. And if we take a look at this address, if we take a look at this address, didn't mean to pull up the map there, you're going to see here there is a note for NCOA update. So what happens is once you turn on that NCOA processing feature, every night or as often as every night, depending on how often you're adding data to your database, the addresses that you have in your database is checked against the U.S. Post Office, U.S. Postal Service's NCOA database. If there is any changes or if there's any matches that are found between the constituent's name and address that you have in your database, and a match is found in the USPS's NCOA database, those updates automatically can happen in your database. And when it does happen, you're always going to have this note that tells you when did the update happen, when was the move found, why was this address updated? Because there was a move found, and it even gives you data on what was the old address, right? And if we go back to just the profile, you see that they have two addresses here. The NCOA update is never going to delete any data from your database. Your data is secure, but it's going to add that new address and make that new address be primary. The old address is still going to be there. It's just going to get bumped down to a non-primary address. And when you generate your letters in Bloomerang, it goes by the primary address. And the same note appears on the old address. It's going to give you NCOA update, move date, reason moved, and what the new address is. So you're never confused as to, wait, which one was the old and which one was the new again? You can always see that in the note. So that's one. It updates if there's a move. If you've ever filled out those change of address forms with a USPS, if something like that is found for your donors, then your database can get updated. Another thing to take a look at here is what other updates or what other address updates can be made. You can see here, this address has been marked as bad. And if we take a look at it, this shows you there was an NCOA update and the post office has marked this as non-mailable. This comes directly from the post office. So that's what they're saying. Something about this address is non-mailable. They weren't able to find a more up-to-date address or a change to the address that makes it mailable. This comes directly from the US Post Office. In that case, if the address is unmailable or non-mailable, it's going to mark the address as bad. Again, it's not going to delete the address, but a great thing about this is you can run a report, look for those bad addresses, add a column for the NCOA note. You can take a look at that and see like, oh, hey, this board member knows this constituent, it was the wrong city, or it was the right city in the wrong state, and you can take action to correct the information in your database. A third thing that you'll see is this, in this case, it's non-mailable. A third reason you might see is standardized. So maybe you have an address or addresses in your database where it's not standardized to USPS standards. Those can get updated too. So that will take a look at road, ROAD versus road RD, street spelled out versus street, avenue, it standardizes everything based on USPS standards. How are apartment numbers stored, or how are they listed in your address? The NCOA processing takes a look at that and updates it so that it matches what the US Postal Service standard is. And that's the address updates. Another great benefit of the NCOA processing is deceased suppression. I know this is a sensitive topic, and that's why it's always good to have more information and be more informed. So if there is a match found, so the NCOA processing takes a look at the name plus the address. If a match is found with the name and address, it's going to mark the constituent as deceased. Now, if you want to learn more information, and again, you can run reports on this. And actually, in fact, if you turn this on and an update is made to your database, you get an email confirmation whenever an update is made. So you can run a report, take a look at what updates were made to your database. Always good to verify the information. For something like this, where a constituent is marked as deceased, I also recommend, we're going to go back into settings. After you've turned it on, you now have access to your NCOA dashboard. This takes you to our partners, True Givers, who runs the NCOA processing for us. And you can find additional information. They might have a link to the obituary that you can take a look at and take appropriate action. Maybe send a note to the family. Again, verify, always verify. It's good to be armed with information. Verify, and you can act accordingly. That's our NCOA processing. And again, this comes free. If you have a standard license with Bloomerang, all you need to do is turn it on, and these updates can happen as frequently as nightly. I say as frequently because it depends how often you add data in there. I wanted to show you as well real quick. You can add a report here. So I'm just looking for any addresses where they have a note that says NCOA, and I've added the NCOA note as a column in my report. You can get as granular as you want with this. Maybe you're looking for a note that says non-mailable. Maybe you're looking for a note that says move. Maybe you're looking for a note that says standardized. You can be as granular with this as you like, but it shows you what kind of update was made to your database. So you can always take a look at that and make any adjustments as necessary. Great question here from Sheila. If we have True Givers, is that different from NCOA? It is not. True Givers is our integration partner that runs the NCOA processing for us. Great question. So I just wanted to summarize again. In terms of our address updates, they're going to have an NCOA note that you can filter for. You're going to see 3 possible reasons for the update. If there's a move, if it's been standardized, or if it's non-mailable. And you can report on any of this information. You can just put note contains NCOA, note contains move, note contains standardized, non-mailable, depending on how granular you want to get with the report. And again, the NCOA processing does not ever delete information in your database. Even if a new address is found, it's going to keep the old one. So you always have that for reference. And free with a standard Bloomerang license. If you don't have it, you can contact our customer success team or let us know in the chat. Or if maybe you're just having trouble finding it or not sure if you have it, check with our support team. They'll be able to tell you if that's available for you. And when we send out the recording, we'll include a link to these slides as well. All these are links to our specific knowledge-based articles that will help you follow the steps that we took today to run your letters and turn on your NCOA processing. I hope that if you haven't run letters in Bloomerang before, this helps you run your first letter. Or if you have run letters in Bloomerang before, I hope you picked up a couple of new tricks from today. If you have any suggestions for classes or features, please feel free to reach out. Thank you again so much for spending part of your day with me. Good luck with your thank you letters. If you need any help, please let us know. Thank you again for being here with us today. We hope to see you in another Academy class soon, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.